Hey everybody, let's get this started before they start up the leaf blowers again. I've been watching Joel Haver for a long time on YouTube. He's an independent video maker. For the last 4 years, every time they have the Oscars, instead of watching the Oscars, he makes a movie. This year he decided to encourage other YouTubers and people to make their own movies during the Oscars, and I decided to participate. Last night I came up with a movie in my head, an old story I was thinking about, and I made it. It's about a man who's dying, and he has to tell a story before he dies about his family member who was responsible for starting the Great Depression and the Second World War. I'm going to leave a link to Joel's video and his channel. Hope you watch the submissions that are given to him. I'm not going to be eligible because mine isn't 40 minutes long. I'm using a 15-year-old Windows Live Movie Maker editor. I don't think I could probably edit 40 minutes on it anyway with my old computer. But I have a playlist of videos I've done over the years that are stories, and also a playlist of comedy videos I've done over the years. I've got over 1,100 videos after 15 years, at least 1 or 2 a week, and most of them are how to do it yourself videos, but a few of them over the years have been stories, and I thought you might be interested. If you like this video that's coming up, I think you'll like my other ones. And don't forget to check out Joel's channel and the submissions of the other people to see what they came up with for their 40-minute videos instead of watching the Oscars. I think it's a fascinating and wonderful thing because the Oscars, they're not really relatable anymore to anybody, and YouTube is where it's at. Making your own stuff. Rob's Homemade Life. Oop. Rob's Homemade Life. All right, guys, take care. See you out there. I don't know how much longer I have. Nobody really does. But I have a story that nobody's ever heard before, that I think I have to tell somebody before there's nobody left to tell. I have an uncle, or I had an uncle, or actually he was a great uncle, that unintentionally ended up causing the Second World War and the Great Depression. He's not in any of the history books. Nobody's ever heard his name. Nobody knows the story. But he basically started the Great Depression and the Second World War. My family came to Miami 1919. It was because of agriculture. People could grow tomatoes and strawberries out of season and make a fortune. The railroad had come in 1918, and it was phenomenal. The people could make $3,500 off for a few acres. There was many negatives about living here, but that was basically why they came. But after a while, it became difficult because of insects and different things, but something else happened. Real estate. There was a magnificent, giant incredible real estate boom in Miami and in South Florida that was famous throughout the country. People came here in droves and became wealthy overnight by buying property and selling it in the afternoon to someone else who would sell it that evening. It was like the internet boom of 2000 and the real estate boom of 2006 and 7 rolled in together. Most of my family participated and then later on lost their shirts and couldn't pay the taxes. But one of my relatives was an uncle, Uncle Wally. He was like the original hippie, but from 1920s. He lived by himself over on Watson Island, and he had a small shack. There was nothing there. You could catch rabbits on South Miami Beach. In fact, for years, that was the largest avocado grove in the country. The little canal there, Fisher built, was to bring barges in so they could load the avocados and take it out to the bay. But anyway, Great Uncle Wally, he lived by himself very happily on a little shack he built out on Watson Island. And he was lazy, but he was smart. And he would do all sorts of things to get by and hustle. But he never did participate in the real estate boom or the agriculture. He just sort of lived by his wits. And he was a very well-read person. One day he read about fishermen in Asia would catch remoras and attach big rings to their tails. Remoras are interesting fish that they suck onto the bottom of larger fish, and mainly sharks and whales. And then when the whales eat, or the sharks eat, the remoras get the scraps of the other fish that are being eaten by the sharks or the other larger fish. Well, one day, Wally would leave trot lines out overnight, and he would catch fish, because that was the laziest way you could catch fish. You would just throw lines out at night, and in the morning check them and go to town and sell your fish, and you were done for the day. He was a lazy man. One day, he caught the world's largest remora. It was huge. It was as big as he was. It was fantastic. It was a freak of nature. They're not supposed to get that big, but there it was. So Wally had a sense of humor. He thought he would attach a ring to it and use it to catch other fish. Well, he was living there on Watson Island, and that's right where the ship channel is, Government Cut. And that's where all the lumber schooners would come in, and the little freighters that were supplying all of the residential real estate construction had to purchase lumber. And everything that was brought in, most of it was brought in by ship. There were some brought in by the railroad. And you had everything coming and going through that one little cut, the Government Cut. And Wally would attach the ring to the remora, and every day he'd check it and didn't catch anything. Well, there was a captain, an old Dutch captain, old squarehead Dutch cheapskate captain. He never used a pilot to come in. He would always time the tides and the wind, so when he came in, he was able to catch the tide to where it was slack, and he knew in the morning time you would start getting a breeze coming in from the east. In the evening, you start getting an offland breeze. He'd use his knowledge of the wind and the tide to where he didn't have to use a pilot. And he brought in a big schooner full of lumber, and he passed Wally's hut there on Watson Island. And that big remora attached itself to the rudder of the captain's schooner. And the schooner had done this repeatedly, where it would time itself and tack into the wind, and it would wait for the tide to change, and it would nestle itself over against the other side of the channel where the port was, without any need of tugs or pilots or anything. Well, that day, when the captain, I think the captain's name was Groyfend, Captain Groyfend, he went to tack, and the ship got in irons. It didn't continue on, so it got caught in irons, and now when the wind changed, it backed him up and piled him up on shore on the north side of the channel where the rocks are, and it holed the schooner, and it began sinking. And they got help as soon as possible, and when they pulled the schooner off, it began to sink. And they had gotten rid of the deck load of lumber to lighten the ship, but the hold didn't have lumber. It had cement. There was only a deck load of lumber. It was cement in the hold, bags of cement for the construction here in Miami. And as the ship was pulled off the rocks into the center of the channel, it sank right there in the middle of the channel, right across. So there was no ships getting in, no ships getting out. This was at the height of the boom of the real estate market in Miami. And at the time, the boom was fueled by speculation. It wasn't investment. It wasn't normal economics. It was greed. It was amazing greed. People knew that they could become wealthy by buying pieces of paper and selling it the next day. Somebody else would sell it to somebody else. And that worked so long as there was somebody to buy it. Well, once the ship sank and the other ships couldn't get in, they couldn't continue building. And since they couldn't build, they couldn't sell. And once they couldn't sell, there was nobody to buy. And then people had all these deeds and sales agreements, and there was nobody to buy. People began selling. And then they wanted to sell cheaper. Then pretty soon the market went south, and the speculation fell to nothing, and there was no market, and people were afraid to buy because they knew tomorrow would be cheaper. Well, it wasn't something that was happening locally. This property was being sold all over the United States, and it was fueling a boom in the whole economy of the United States. And as people began selling, the people at the very top, they were getting hit really hard. So they began selling stock to cover their losses. And as they sold their stock, then other people started selling their stock. And then pretty soon you had a stock market collapse within a few months of the schooner running aground in the harbor. And of course, once you had the stock market collapse, you had the Depression. And then after you had the Depression, you had the Second World War. So we don't like to talk about it very much, but in a way, Uncle Wally had a lot to answer for.